everyone, I'm Katie Roome from ParavisPress.com. On my website and here on YouTube, I promote indie sci-fi and fantasy through positive reviews, discussions, interviews, excerpts, and news. Today, I'm really excited to share with you an interview with George Alexopoulos, the wandering cartoonist who serves no master. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hello.
Thank you again for the invitation. It's
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming. Why don't you start, for people who don't know you, just give some context about who you are and what you do.
Well, I guess popularity-wise, I'm a cartoonist who does kind of satire-ish current events strips. People would know me on Twitter or Instagram. My handle is at GPrime85. I'm also I guess cartoonist in the sense of comic strips, not just strips, but like graphic novels, manga. That's actually my background. I trained in doing that for many years. I've had books published, and I like telling stories, and I've done a little animation work. I've worked in video games, but probably people would know me from my current events / political strips. By way of introduction, I guess that's what I would be known for. I don't know.
What do you think is your favorite type of work?
Oh, I'm of the personality type where whatever I'm not working on is what I want to work on. So back when I was in high school or middle school, I was supposed to be doing schoolwork, but instead I would be drawing my magnum opus graphic novels. And when I'm working on my graphic novels, I want to work on my strips. And when I'm working on my strips, I want to work on my graphic novels. And now I want to work on a novel. And I'm also doing a children's book. So I have that dumb personality where I guess this is awful to say, but it's not true in real life. Like, I'm creatively promiscuous. I want to work on like a novel / longer story or like a black and white story, something really cool, like a Kurosawa movie or something, because I've been really jealous, I guess, I watch these great movies, even Dracula, the old Bela Lugosi movie, and I'm like, I want to make something great like that. And then I start drawing like 2 panels, and then that's my whole day of work. And then I wake up the next day, and I'm like, what do I want to work on now? Not that anymore. And the problem with graphic novels is they take so long that you have to maintain that creative energy for months. And I guess I'm more of a day-to-day type of creative person. So a strip is done in maybe 4 to 6 hours. So that is most suitable for my personality. But I want to do longer stuff as well, including novels, which we talked about last time a little bit, I think. My fear is that I'm not used to writing prose yet, so I have to practice more. And I don't know if it's any good. It's hard to know with prose, and you need editors, you need other eyes on it.
And when you talk about doing a novel, are you thinking mostly about adapting Mary Sue in that way? Or have you thought about other ones as well?
Mary Sue, definitely. I have a ton of stories that I've written scripts for, like graphic novel scripts. So it's mostly dialogue with some stage direction. I guess it could be converted into a movie script very easily. So it's like George picked up the pen and tapped his head. He thought a bit, and then he says these lines of dialogue. So that doesn't convert very well to novel form, because novel has a lot of flavor text, and he tapped the pen as if it was, and you would use similes, metaphors, and
sure,
imagery. I'm sure you're well versed in that stuff. Yeah, so the narrator becomes a character in themselves, depending on if it's first person, third person. There's a million different ways to write a story. So yeah, I have all these scripts lying around, and as I'm getting older, like I mentioned earlier, in my late 30s or mid to late 30s, and as I get older, and I think if I could even draw a page per day of a graphic novel, there's only 365 days in the year, and I'm not getting any younger, and I don't think I can afford assistance. So there's only so many stories I can tell by the time I would retire, hopefully when I'm 90, but let's be realistic. And, I even think of like Charles Schultz, who had a heart attack at, I think in his 60s or something, and then he developed a shaky hand after he had heart surgery. And it didn't really affect, it made his strips more charming, but, you never know if something's going to happen health-wise where I can't draw a series anymore. But I love telling stories, so I want to at least have writing as an option. If I decide, here's this really long story that I just won't have time to draw, it won't be optimal, but at least the story is done, at least the characters exist, and at least I can share these funny, interesting stories with at least some people who might want to read them. So I do think I should learn how to write. I guess I know how to write, but I need to learn how to write better. It's something that's been bothering me for a long time, because especially, and I'm rambling again, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
If my primary job right now is drawing current event strips, that leaves me X hours per day, per week. And I can put those hours to better use by writing than drawing a story. Because I think my recent script that I wrote 6 pages in text, and then I started converting it into graphic novel form. 6 pages turned into 50 drawn pages, 6 written pages. So 50 drawn pages would take me 2 months, let's say, and it took me 2 days to write it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
That conversion just bothers me. I don't know what to do with the information, but it's like, couldn't I tell so many more stories, even if not as many people read these days? I don't know. Like, do you know, are the statistics in our favor? Do people read anymore? I don't know.
I think there's a large untapped market, particularly among male readers. But that being said, male readers tend to have less time to read. So I think that's where graphic novels and the visual format kind of comes in as being nice and appreciated in that demographic, because they don't tend to have a ton of time to devote to reading anyway.
I do all my reading through audiobook.
Sure. I'm seeing a lot of people say that.
I love driving and walking, or even working, and then I'll listen to a book. But it's true, I can't sit down and just read. I need to be doing other things, like the dishes or anything.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's not bad.
No.
Is it?
No, not at all. I mean, I think there could be a conversation about whether or not that counts as reading. I think educators and people in academia would tend to say probably not. But I am of the opinion that it's still consuming the story, you know?
You still get the images.
Yeah. I don't want to say narrator, because that's a literary something, but like the person who is doing the audio, can affect that. So it becomes kind of a separation between just you and the author working together on creating images. There's this third person who's using their voice.
Okay.
But I still think it's wonderful, you know. Otherwise, you would be not reading. Like, that would be the other
It's true.
option. So
I love books as objects. I collect them. I have a little collection, let's say, and I still buy them despite, not sitting down with them. I'll read maybe a little bit sitting down, and then I get anxious. I'm like, oh, I should be doing something else. And then I'll get the audio version, and it's not the same, I guess, in the sense of, like, I can't with audio, I can't go back and really digest and redigest information the same way that visually, even as I read something on a page, I memorize the shape of what I'm reading, like the actual text on the page, to the point where if there's a really good scene, I remember what side of the page and where on the page it was, and like, oh, where was that thing I read? It was up here somewhere, and I can find it just by flipping. There's some, I guess it's tied to memory and how much a person digests the story. But audio is better than nothing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny how when you think about reading, you have this impression of being completely caught up in the world. But then if you have to go back and find something, you have like this impression of like the texture of the words, like whether or not there's like a lot of dialogue or chunkier description paragraphs or
Tempo.
where it was. Yeah.
That's why I should read physical books, especially because when I write, I'm hearing the words as if I'm talking or saying them out loud, which is fine. But then I think, like, surely an author wouldn't use the word of the main protagonist so many times. Surely they would rearrange the sentence. Like, I have my mouse book. The main character's name currently is Strudel. Like, it's a weird word,
Cute.
and it stands out to me. But, okay, so Strudel went outside, he yada, yada, yada. And the next sentence is, Strudel saw a thing. And it's like, wait, I just started a sentence with his name. It's weird to see. So now this is editing 101. I'm preaching to the converted. But I'm like, in an audio book, I can't go back and flip through pages easily and see, wait, did Tolkien really start sentences like that? It's just, I get very self-aware. But that's where you get caught in the muck of writing versus like self-editing. They say never edit until you finish the first draft. There's a million different ways to write.
Yeah.
But I'm now caught in that web of editing, re-editing, and this book is so late, and I'm still not finished drawing it. And my wife's shop has launched, and like I have to get this book on her shop. The poor lady's waiting. But I want it to be right. I want it to be special.
Yeah.
Even with a little 50-page children's book, I still am self-editing to the point of madness. So God help me if I actually try a novel.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. When you're listening to an audiobook, it sounds very polished. And that's the sign of a good voice actor, probably. And they can do 2 or 3 takes until they find a way of saying it that sounds natural and right and good. Whereas when you're looking at it on the page, you know, if you're looking too closely, words start to look like they're not spelled correctly, and you know, you have a way in your head that you interpret a sentence.
Yeah.
And
or there's a million ways. I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's just a million ways to say the same image. You give a classroom full of students, like, I want you to describe this picture, and they'll all describe it in different ways. And then everyone reads their interpretations or however they wanted to draw that picture using words. And you can see, here's the good way to do it, here's a less good way. And that's really instructive of there's no wrong way. And then I was even listening to a Norm Macdonald podcast where he was trying to say something along the lines of, if you're describing something, describe it as if you had a blind person next to you. And, okay, we're walking down the street. I see a fence. And is that all you tell the blind person? No, describe the fence. Is it wood? Is it metal? Is it rusty? Is the paint coming off? How many nails are there? Is there grass? Is it mowed? There's a million different really juicy details that you, as a prose writer, could really get stuck in the muck of describing too much. But as a visual writer, and this is very much according to your style, like I was reading The Handmaid's Tale, and I stopped reading it because I'm an ADD freak. But The Handmaid's Tale struck me. Margaret Atwood?
I think so, yeah.
She's a really good writer. Regardless of, I would, goof on the story sometimes. But as far as flavor and text and prose goes, she would say, like, we walked down, or I walked down a sidewalk and it parted like hair or something like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, I know exactly what that looks and feels like. And it was so rich. And every paragraph she writes, sometimes it's cheesy, but she's very visually powerful. And I felt the same way about early Anne Rice, which I was a huge fan of. Maybe it's even a lady writer trick, because a lot of men writers, like I talked about Ernest Hemingway last time, or I started reading Charles Bukowski's stuff, and they're very brusque and what's the word I'm looking for? Spartan in their descriptions. Sometimes they're very powerful, but they're not as flowery and juicy. See, I'm screwing it up myself.
I think it probably depends on the author, because we talked a little bit last time about Tolkien and how he can go on and on.
He can, that's true.
So there's definitely it's probably just a personal style type of thing.
But and he took his time with those books too.
Yep.
Who knows?
And right now, as far as indie stuff goes, I'm seeing a lot more, like in the pulp rev circles, of sparse descriptions and more emphasis on action. And that seems to be appealing to a male audience, that those kind of author priorities. But
so like Conan dropped his axe on the guy's head and it split like a watermelon.
Like just like it split. Like that's it.
And guy readers are like, yeah, that's great.
And but I want
that scene written by Margaret Atwood. That would be funny. I'm sorry.
But I see more descriptive stuff come out of indies as well. Pulp rev is just one example of a movement that has a sort of a specific feel and flavor to it as far as descriptions. But
yeah, writers got to know their demographic, I suppose.
Yeah.
But artists, by temperament, I always say, like, we're emotional sponges, and I tend to absorb the energy of people around me. So if I'm reading a book by, a really liberal lady, I tend to get into her spirit, and I'm like, yeah, this is great, this is beautiful. Or if I'm reading a tough Conan the Barbarian type of story, I'm like, yes, fight good, death bad, or death good.
Yeah.
Fire useful.
So what would you say, like, if you were to write a novel, sort of like take Mary Sue, why don't we start by talking about like what Mary Sue's about, and then talk about maybe like how your vision for it has changed, and like where you like would like to go as an author with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it started out as I wanted it to be an ongoing comic series, issue by issue, like American style. And again, I trained with the Japanese manga. My pages and my chapters are paced like manga, which is very different from American. So I wanted to try the American method of 30 pages to an issue, always end on a cliffhanger. The pages are paced in a certain way. There's a certain number of lines of dialogue you can use. Manga is usually very light on dialogue, like one sentence per balloon. usually, whereas American comics can have several sentences or even a paragraph in a dialogue balloon, which Japanese people hate and I hate, just tempo-wise. But anyway, I wanted to make a series about a lady. There was a lot of talk at the time about female protagonists being, quote, Mary Sue's, which is sort of a self-insert for the author, creating an idealized, perfect female main character who's indestructible. And I wanted to sort of goof on that stereotype by creating an overpowered main character who is really clumsy and generally, kind of a goofball. And I wanted to play with the juxtaposition of she's super powerful, but she's not worthy of it. And when she comes to save the day, everyone says, no, go away. We don't want you. You're going to make a mess of things. And I thought that was a lot of fun. And the more I wrote the story, I like to write bullet notes for myself. And you can rearrange bullet notes, you can add to them. And my loose notes file for Mary Sue turned into this tome of there's so much I want to do with her. And it grew to the point where she was having these crazy, huge adventures, and there was this whole meta story growing out of nowhere. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? So I've only drawn 5 issues, but I've written enough to be 20, 30 issues in. And I don't know how I would ever find time to draw that, but it's pretty much already written. So my thing is I need to figure out how to deliver this story in a way that will satisfy readers, but also not take half my life, because I have dozens of other stories I want to tell as well. And I don't want to be on my deathbed when I'm, a bazillion years old, hopefully, thinking, I really wish I'd finished those stories. And I recently had a death in the family, and I'm always thinking about it, but now especially, it's like, I don't want to face the end and say, I wish. It would be so sad for me to, I don't know. Everyone wants to leave something behind, So I want to make a little library of work, a little body of work that I'm proud of. Maybe it won't be ideal in the sense of Mary Sue really does belong as a graphic novel. It is a very visual story. But if I don't have time, is it better not to tell it at all? So that's where I am, I guess.
Sure. How do you think it stacks up with your other stories? Is it one of your favorites, or?
Well, all my characters are fun. They're like friends that I get to visit.
Yeah.
I think the tone is super different from my other stories. I don't remember, did you read Bad Dreams?
I did, yes.
Okay. So that's really serious and dark and gothic romance-ish. And Mary Sue is very whimsical, playful, goofy, feminine. There are serious things in that story. So it's really about, I wouldn't say I have one favorite or another, but it's like I have this library of excellent movies. And am I in the mood for a comedy? Am I in the mood for horror? It's just what I'm in the mood for that day.
Sure.
Yeah. I like them all. I like her. I like the story. I like the world she lives in, and I like her cast of characters that surround her. It would be a shame not to finish that story. I want to.
Yeah. What do you think is the because both Bad Dreams and Mary Sue are female protagonists?
There is, I guess, in Bad Dreams, it's shared between a male and female protagonist. Okay. That's a good question. And I've always thought about this. It's a weird thing. I grew up around women, I suppose. And so I'm obviously not a woman. Maybe that's not so obvious anymore. But I have these male interests of I love action movies and power fantasies. But I also really genuinely like Jane Austen and poetry and the softer side of things and So I write these stories kind of, there's a school of thought of try to write subconsciously, and maybe you don't even have a plan, you just see what comes out of you. So maybe there's this subconscious side of me that likes the female protagonist, as because I've read a lot of stories with female protagonists. But as a male, I also have like Rosemary, the character in Mary Sue, has like this power suit, and she's really strong and shoots lasers. So I'm inserting the male power fantasy through a female avatar. So I just think that's interesting. It wasn't
Yeah.
really planned. But then Bad Dreams is the male. It's a male main character. Sebastian's a male, obviously. But he meets and marries a lady, Lisbeth, who see, I don't want to say too much, but yeah, they share the main character role, at least in issue 1 and probably 2. I don't want to say too much. But that's another.
I think probably saying gothic romance is probably hint enough that things are not going to work as
I don't know.
as sunny side up as people would.
But that's the thing. See, that's our poetic side, I guess. I grew up, again, Anne Rice, big fan. I like the tragic, painful, yearning, which is funny because my wife is not romantic at all. It's actually hilarious. It's like I'll say, I hope this doesn't embarrass her, saying this. Like, I'll say she's really pretty this morning. She's like, "Why are you being an asshole?" It's like it's a joke between us.
Sure, yeah.
Like, "Oh, I'm sorry for cursing."
Oh, you're fine.
I should have asked. She'll say, jokingly, like, or I'll grab her butt as a joke, and it's like, "Don't touch me." So I'm the romantic one.
Yeah.
I like Phantom of the Opera. She likes Metallica. I think it's really hilarious. So yeah, I was talking about Bad Dreams. I'm sorry, I'm embarrassed.
So how many? You said Mary Sue is going to be. You have a lot planned for that. Do you have more planned for Bad Dreams?
I do. That's the problem. I started it out in issue 1. It says issue 1 of 4 in the inside cover. But then as I kept writing, I'm like, no. This is like 10 issues. This is a great story. There's so much I can do after issue number 4. So there's a big story event by issue 4 that I plan, which will have an ending. And then there's more that can happen afterwards.
Oh, nice.
So as I'm drawing it, and I was drawing it the other day, issue 2, and I'm drawing it panel by panel. It's so slow. And there's so much I want to do, and I have this continuing problem of the more I work on a story, the more comes out of it. And I'm not planning any of this stuff, but it's like, who is this guy Sebastian, for example, the main character? Where is he from? What caused him to have an event in his life where he was kicked out of the military? And he's got all these scars on his back. Where did he get those from? Why? And I know, but I want to tell everyone why. And I think it's really interesting why. And I think the world he lives in is really interesting. So the more I work on a story, the more I want to tell more of it. And from a storytelling perspective, it's good for an author to know way more than they ever tell in the actual novel. Like Lord of the Rings is a small chunk, and then there's the Silmarillion on the side. So maybe it's better for me not to tell too much, but my instinct is I've met these friends, and I want to tell everyone about these friends because they had this amazing adventure. And that's just the instinct of the storyteller, I think, is, hey, I had this vision, this dream. I want to tell you all about it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the job.
Yeah. I just had, like, as you were talking, like, this idea of, you know how most people start with a book and then they get like a graphic novel adaptation. It's kind of like you're working the other way, where you have these beautiful images and you're just not able to tap into the story as much as you want to. and
That's
you
really
might be moving into novelization, kind of the opposite movement that other people do.
And that's odd because it brings up the question of, is there a true form of a story? Is it just preference? Because the written word has, like, you can even look at the book versus the novel debate that everyone has. Which one is better? The answer is enjoy whatever you want to enjoy, I suppose. A book has advantages in the sense of richness. A book will take 25 hours to read, whereas the movie might take 2.5 hours. A graphic novel takes maybe 15, no, a single issue of a book, like a comic book, takes 15 minutes, whereas that same story in written form might take an hour or two to read. So I suppose it's, what does the story reveal itself? How does it reveal itself? How do I, it's like it's telling me, I want to be told this way. And then I have to say, do I have the resources to execute that?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't think I like drawing. I do, but I don't know if I have the time. And I really feel bad for starting a story in visual form. Like, it's not like I wouldn't illustrate my own books. I can do that.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a happy medium I can offer. I feel bad for, like, people bought Mary Sue issues, and now it's like, okay, the story will continue in text form. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I'll get over that. I think it's really a matter of resources and what does the story, how does it want to be told?
Yeah. That's an interesting idea. And I guess I haven't thought about it too much myself, but the idea of an ideal medium and how sometimes it's obvious with books and movies, like this needed to be a book or this is an unfilmable story. You hear sometimes people say.
Yeah.
And then other times it's not so obvious, or it just needed a few smaller alterations to make it a movie,
Yeah.
as opposed to a book. I almost want to just throw out Twilight as an example.
That's fair.
Because as a book, Twilight is driven by the tension and suspense of the unknown and the element of interrelationship danger that's sort of dramatized by the fact that he's a vampire. But
yeah, that's fair.
In the movie, they start bringing in the outside conflict of the strange vampires coming to town much earlier in the story. Because in the book, that comes quite a bit after the two of them have worked out some of their relationship questions.
That's true. It's almost like the bad guys coming in at the end of the story is a way to test their relationship, as opposed to, I'm not going to call it a Deus Ex Machina, but it's a way of reinforcing the main theme of the story, which is their relationship.
Yeah.
Versus, I guess, the movie, I don't remember much of the movie. It's just like, this happens, and then this happens, and then we have an adventure, and then he saves her, which is fine. But yeah. I don't think they did a good job with the movie either. I actually liked the first book a lot. It really put me in her shoes when I read it. I mean, what, this is 10 plus years ago. But it's like, this makes sense of what she would be thinking in this scenario, and that's really fun to get into the mind of a character like that.
Yeah.
But books don't let you really get in the head of a person's internal narrative, so that's an advantage for the book, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Movies, well, like with the Twilight movie, everybody came away with the impression that Bella was like a blank slate, you know,
Kind
and
of wooden, yeah.
yeah, um,
That's
which
true.
which was a very different impression if you had read the books first, I think.
Yes. And even as I was reading the first book, I think they weren't as good as the series went along, but the first book was really good. And her version in my head was a lot different than what was presented by whatever that actress was. She seemed very stoic in the movie, whereas in the book, I think she had an understated. But that's the thing. If you read her first person account of that story, you can tell she's acting stoic, perhaps,
Yeah,
as a way of communicating to other characters. But internally, you can see the tornado uh, going through her head. So when a character acts a certain way towards other characters, which we see on the surface in a movie, you have to take extra time. Like, say, a Kurosawa movie. I don't know if you're a Kurosawa nerd at all.
not really.
It's fair. You can really tell his characters are thinking and struggling, and there's internal things going on that we're not seeing in the dialogue. And he's so powerful because he's a very visual director. When they talk about what cinema is, there's something in just the way a character moves or doesn't move, the way they dress, things they say or don't say. That's great cinema in the way that you can feel their internal dialogue and you can project yourself into their spirit. That's good storytelling.
Yeah,
A lot of modern movies, American movies, especially like the Marvel movies or whatever, Twilight, The Hunger Games, I don't think they take the time to do that because most audiences are like, where's the action? I have popcorn. I want something to happen. Whereas a lot of a Kurosawa-ish movie is not as popular, but it's deep, and I like that.
yeah, yeah. Something that takes its time more.
Yeah, even the Sense and Sensibility adaptation from Ang Lee, who did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon also, I thought his Sense and Sensibility was way better than the Pride and Prejudice we saw with Pirates of the Caribbean lady.
Keira Knightley.
Keira Knightley. I would argue that Sense and Sensibility was way better because Ang Lee took the time to just put the camera on the sisters, and especially Eleanor. Let her be our avatar as she watches Marianne be a fool and go after what's his face, Willoughby. And we see her expressions, and we're like, we are the older sister saying, "Don't do that. Don't fall in love with that jerk." So she falls in love with Severus Snape instead, and that's weird. But that's another conversation. I'm talking about too many obscure things.
It's been a while since I saw any adaptations other than the Keira Knightley one for Pride and Prejudice, which is too bad because I
no,
I don't know. They're long. Maybe that's
they are long. That's true.
Maybe that's my main criticism. I like Darcy in the BBC ones. I can't remember the actor's name, but I like his style in general. I've seen him in a couple of things where he acts kind of similarly.
Not Colin Firth.
Maybe. I don't remember. I'm bad with names.
That's all right. I'm sure people tuning in weren't expecting a conversation about Jane Austen for 20 minutes, but I could go on. Like, the BBC Elizabeth Bennet is not the way I envisioned her at all.
Yeah.
It's wrong. It's terrible. I'll still watch it, though.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that I really like about and it's really unfortunate that everyone knows it as the Keira Knightley version, but
oh, that was Colin Firth. Colin Filth, I say.
I think one of the nice things about that one is how tight the sisters feel. How
that's fair.
Comfortable with one another. You kind of get that that impression that they are a casual family.
Yes.
As opposed to the
That
BBC
is
one, it feels much more rigid.
formal.
Yeah, formal.
That's a good point. Because I think in the original book they were more lower middle class, about to lose all their money, if I remember. So it wouldn't make sense that they're too. Well, that's the story of Sense and Sensibility as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just a little. What's the word? Little bit country.
Yes.
A little rural.
Well, and I think that's one of Darcy's main criticisms of Jane for Bingley, is that her family is
They're
rude.
a little. Yeah, you're right.
They're not, they don't have good party manners.
That's right. That was the prejudice part. See, it's been a while, but yeah, it's basically the girls have big mouths, and if they're not able to keep their mouths shut, which is why Elizabeth disliked Darcy, because he had a secret and he kept his mouth shut, and that made it look like he was proud, but actually he was being pertinent. So they both prejudged each other. Hey, that's a great book. That's a great idea for a book. That's a cute story.
It's a really nice story.
I always like the Jane Austen thing of like, it's a pressure cooker. They hate each other for 99% of the time, and then it flips and everyone's happy. The end.
Yep.
It's so funny, but it's so cute. And now I'm being a huge nerd. There's Persuasion, the BBC Persuasion. I swear I'll stop talking after this. And there was, I don't remember much of it, but at the very end, she's like, she turns and sees Frederick, and she's like swoons. Ah, it's you. And he's like, yes, I have loved you this whole time. And then it ends, but I was like, oh my God, that's so cute. I love it. The whole story is them being separate, and then they finally talk for the first time at the end of the story. It's brilliant. I love that stuff. It's corny. Yeah. I want to write stories like that. Even as a guy, I think there's value in a story like that. And even Stupid Mary Sue, darn it, I want to work on it some more. There's stuff like that in the story as well, where there's this scoundrel, this rogue character, a guy named Songbird, who he's a criminal, or is he? And she's going to get him, or is she? And what's his motivations? And I want to spend time having them circle the bowl. Maybe they're at odds. Are they going to end up together? Is there other guys in the mix? And there's so much fun soap opera stuff I can do. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stupid.
Well, should we wrap up? Would you?
Up to you. Was this valuable at all? Should I
think
talk
so.
about
it was a lot of fun.
Things? Talk about Jane Austen for an hour.
No, I love it. This is the kind of stuff I enjoy, so thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Is there anything else, honestly, you want to discuss? Like, because I know last time we didn't get to talk about as much that you wanted to. Like, do you want to talk about anything else, like, at all? Like, I want to make this worth your time.
No, this is great, and I maybe I'll take some of the stuff at the end from last time and tack it on here.
Sure.
Because
splice it in.
Yeah, we had some fun last time too. So I was just too starstruck in the beginning. So.
Well, please erase that, because I'm just a nerd like anyone else. There's nothing special about me.
Where can people find you?
Twitter and Instagram for now until I get kicked off. I'm at GPrime85. And then I have a little YouTube channel, which is just my name, George Alexopoulos. And if anyone wants to buy my books, we have an Etsy shop, which is linked on my Twitter. And we're starting a children's shop. My family's starting a children's shop called Polka Dot, we called it, P-O-K-I-D-O-T, on Etsy. and we're really proud of that. And we've got like these little cute bears and sheep animals and stuff, and that's where my children's book is going to be released in hopefully a month or so.
Nice. Oh, I'm really excited for that.
I hope it turns out good. I will send you that copy, I promise.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. I'm scared of what you will say, but I'm sure your notes will make it better.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And have a great day.
You too. It was a pleasure. Let's do it again.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, subscribe, and keep an eye out for some bonus content. This was actually the second discussion that I had with George, and I'm planning to share some of that first conversation with you guys soon. Thank you again.